You get a knock at your door and you find out the city's, tipped off or whatever the case is, and they've got a notice of compliance on your door now because it doesn't actually meet zoning. Like, it isn't a fourplex. Are you buying this for yourself? Are you intending to rent it out? Like, what's your intention? There are more things to think about. There are more things to discuss. There are more things that you should be taking an initiative on and going out there and getting, properly officially educated on, right?
I'm never going to buy real estate. I'm really scared. The big thing here is, again, you've got a power team on your side, right? What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video, we catch up with Ryan from Carson Law and talk about the legal consequences of not getting building permits. Now, we're going to dive into this entire subject with Ryan, but spoiler alert, you shouldn't do this. There are consequences to not getting building permits, guys, and understand that maybe your uncle or your grandfather tells you that, back in my day, it wasn't important. Well, it's no longer their day. And so it's important you understand what the average investor and the average buyer expects in this current market, because it's way different than it looked 20, 30, 40 plus years ago. So we're going to dive into that and more with Ryan from Carson Law. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with Ryan from Carson Law. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Doing well. So today we're going to be talking about building permits. In particular, is there consequences to not going and getting building permits? And I think this is a subject matter, I guess I might even just preface this, because every new investor, I think at some moment in time, has this question in their minds, or like I get a lot of these questions from brand new investors. Are permits important? It's kind of like a little whisper. They don't want it to be heard too loud. And I'm just like, I understand that perspective. When I was a young, aggressive real estate investor, I thought, man, that shit's just going to get in my way. But it turns out there actually is some consequences. And I think what's important to understand too is sometimes you may be listening to your grandpa or your father or someone that's been there, done that decades ago. And maybe it was a slightly different environment in regards to expectations than what we see a lot today. So I guess before I even get into some of my questions, just what's your general thoughts, or what's maybe a few experiences you've seen clients go through when talking about building permits and maybe the lack thereof?
Yeah, I mean, so we see this mostly with the real estate investors when it's like the multi-residential transactions. People are buying like a duplex or something between 2 to 7+ units, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we typically, and we're seeing this actually on some deals today, a lot of people either don't know to do this because of inexperience or whatever, or to your point, your illustration and in the preface, they choose not to like bother with it because, it might be too much time or money or both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking it won't really probably catch up to me, or won't be that much money or whatever. Like with these kinds of transactions, I mean, you're doing the transaction to make money. Like, it's supposed
Mm-hmm.
to be an investment opportunity for you. And so, I mean, you need to really make sure you're getting all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And so we try to encourage all the clients to retain us additionally to get a search done for building permits, work orders, zoning, that kind of thing. So we can verify for the client, just like we're verifying the title search, are there any issues with these 3 main areas, right? Because at the end of the day, if it turns out, for example, like with the deal that we're having today, they've represented to you that it's a fourplex, and you're going to have 4 like units that you can actually use and rent and so forth. And that's what they have. That's what they're doing. But then it turns out that, you get a knock at your door and you find out the city's, tipped off or whatever the case is, and they've got a notice of compliance on your door now because it doesn't actually meet zoning. Like, it isn't a fourplex. It's only a twoplex, right? Or, it's a fourplex. It can be a fourplex, but people didn't go through the permits to make 2 of the units. right? So there's those kinds of issues that we're finding with clients that comes up, which can have fairly significant consequences, right? Depending on ultimately what you're being told is not in compliance, and then what are the steps to go about fixing it. Like, it can drastically change the consequence, right? It could be like, hey, here's your order to comply. You need to file for the building permit inspection. It's a cost of $500 or something, like, not fairly nominal. Guy comes out, inspects, you pass with like very little issue, and boom, you're good to go. So that might not be that consequential, but take the same example, and they say you got to have an inspection done. They show up, and there's like, it's not the fire code. It's not, these are building code violations. This is that. And, now you get a quote from a contractor to get it all to code, and it's like 25 grand. So like, that's obviously a much bigger financial cost. Or even worse, let's say you were told and you saw them, the seller using it as a, the seller saw it being used, or the buyer saw the seller using it as a fourplex, but it turns out it's only single family. And then again, you get a knock on the door, order to comply. Well, you can't have all these additional units. You can use it single family. Now your whole game plan of buying the property to make money on 4 units, you can only have 1 unit. So that's a big cash flow issue all of a sudden, right? So you could have a very nominal and inconsequential, I guess, results to not, doing the building permit due diligence, checking work orders, checking zoning, checking use, that kind of thing. But then at the end of the day, you could have like some very consequential, issues. And I guess it probably really depends just how much bad luck you have, right? Because I don't think too many people are going out like ratting people out. But I mean, like, once the city knows or somehow gets tipped off or something like that, I mean, they're on you about it. And then you're going to be stuck with enforcement after that, right?
Yeah, really appreciate that perspective. And I think, again, one of the things I often see is people kind of basing what happened in the past versus what happens today. And I'd like to maybe just share a perspective here and then get your input on it, Ryan. But, oftentimes, here in London, I used to buy a lot of my properties in a certain neighborhood, and there was a lot of like immigrant families from the 1950s and 60s that moved into that neighborhood. And like back then, you could kind of just get away with anything. You could literally build another whole addition, and like there's a good chance that it was just going to work out for you, right? That would be grandfathered in or something. And oftentimes when I'm looking at buying a property off one of these guys, no, you just don't understand. That's the way it is. That you just do it and you get away with it, and there's no big consequences. And to be honest, even just in my short period of real estate investing from 2010 to today in 2021, I've noticed a change in the environment, right? Like, I've noticed that city inspectors are a little bit more proactive. I think neighbors are more comfortable being proactive as well. And then in addition to that, what I also find is a lot of buyers are being a lot more careful, and a lot of them are being, recommended or guided by their lawyer or their realtor to be like, hey, let's get confirmation that everything's legit here, right? Like, let's get them to sign something. Let's get them to go to the city and confirm that this is the case. And again, for those guys that were doing these crazy kind of cowboy tricks back in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, I think it worked for them back then. And whether that was right or wrong doesn't really matter. But I think the big difference is now it doesn't work fundamentally. And I think a lot of people, if you're, say, a flipper and you're flipping a house and you're going to make it that nice, pretty, turnkey, ready for a new family to move in, that new family wants assurances that like, hey, they actually pulled permits on this. I want to see them. And if you haven't, I don't feel safe moving my family in, or we won't pay top dollar on this property anymore. Again, I think that 10 plus years ago, that was way less common to see in the market. So love to hear just your general thoughts or opinions on that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt. And I would agree with you I think people, well, technology in general has just, made the access to information so much more at your fingertips, literally.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much easier for people just to proactively make themselves informed. For example, like, oh, I'm going to just go on London,
Yep.
City of London's website, punch in like building permits and work orders and zoning and check this place out a little bit and see what's going on. And like, you'll be able to actually pull up some records there, right?
Yep.
At least generally like what the zoning is, or at least what, whatever, right? So yeah, 100%, like people are way more hypersensitive, which is, in some ways a good thing and maybe in some ways a bad thing, in the sense that if people are a bit more relaxed, well, we might not have as many problems, right? But because most people are more high strung and I think, hypersensitive to making sure everything is, legit and all on the up and up, and it's not like the handshake thing that you talked about from the 60s. There is definitely more of that happening now. Like, one thing that people might, use kind of the example of the person who's kind of like buying to flip it, and they're going to they want to flip it over to somebody who's going to then use it as like their family residence or something like that. Like, the good part with title insurance coverage for single family residential properties is if you don't do any of that due diligence or any of those searches yourself or with your lawyer, like as long as the use by the policy owner, which is the owner of the property, is for single family residential use, then that policy automatically builds in like a lot of coverages to deal with issues like survey issues, building permit issues, work orders, zoning, that kind of stuff. The issue though is most of those kinds of properties, like single family use, they're not the problem, right? The problem that I see more prevalently is with the real estate investor buying those multi-residential properties. It's not even really the commercial. Like, the commercial is not even that bad, because I mean, it's kind of hard for somebody to be operating and running a business out of something that's not commercial. Like, that's probably going to get hit, right? So I don't find that you see these kinds of problems with commercial nearly as much. It's the multi-res, because it's like, somebody does the shortcuts and they just, make a basement apartment, well, yeah, I can put, I'm a handy guy. I'm going to put a kitchen in and a bathroom and a bedroom and make my basement into an apartment. And now I can rent it out and I'm going to get a little cash flow going in my place. And now I've got a single family plus one, or like a single family accessory, or whatever they call it. Right. And I think it's those kinds of scenarios, duplexes, triplexes, quads, any of those multi-reses are really the ones that are the most problematic, I think, for us and a lot of our clients, because that's where you really have to kind of do your due diligence and, check all the searches you possibly can. And more specifically, make sure you have really strong reps and warranties from the seller that they are telling you it's used as a duplex, and it's legal, or it's legal non-conforming, right? Like, one, like, you got to kind of have that, otherwise, what can you do at that point, right?
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. And also, for anyone now that's kind of panicking, being like, I'm never going to buy real estate, I'm really scared. The big thing here is, again, you've got a power team on your side, right? So whether you're working with Carson Law or another lawyer, that lawyer is going to be there to help guide you through this. They should be able to explain the process. And I think I'm going to use this kind of as an opportunity to just chat about a general business principle that I love. And so there's a author named Steve Sim. He's famous for just being able to kind of get things done and things like that. But one of the things he talks about when looking to use like a lawyer or an accountant or someone like that on your power team is he loves what he calls the chug test. And the chug test is, would you be willing to spend enough time with that person that you could chug a beer? Would you be willing to go down to the pub and have a conversation with them? I think that that's unfortunately a mistake a lot of people make when picking a lawyer or hiring an accountant, is they almost treat like this person works for the government. and like as if it's a police officer, and like I'm not going to say anything to get myself in trouble, yes no answers, and I'm not going to tell them anything more than they need, when in fact, like Ryan, if you hire him as your lawyer, he's here to help guide you through this process. So you should feel comfortable having these conversations, exploring it with him or one of his team members, and be like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm getting some weird vibes about this property. I feel like this guy was maybe a handyman special, if you know what I mean. Is there anything extra we should be thinking about buying this property? Like, you need to be willing to have those conversations, because if you don't explain the situation, it's really difficult for Ryan or anyone else to be able to mind read and understand exactly all the different variables that could be at play. Does that make sense, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely true. 100%. I mean, you've got to, don't be afraid to, tell us kind of everything. I mean, first of all, it's lawyer client, confidentiality and privilege. So that's number one. And number two, we need as much information as you can possibly share with us. Cause like you said, I can't read your mind, and, you got to tell us as much as you can, as early as you can in the process too, because time is the only commodity we can't get back. So if we don't find out, stuff about the property until very close to the end, then it's really a lot harder for us to be that much help at that point, right? With the more time we have, possibly the more solutions we can offer or we can go about. I think that is probably I think maybe a next topic for us. What's changed in the last 10 years of real estate. We'll save that for the next one. But I think time is the one thing that is the biggest changed factor about doing a real estate deal. And so at the end of the day, the more time and information you can give your lawyer and your power team members as a client, the better you are going to be off, because you're giving people an opportunity to help you, to problem solve, to sleuth around, to figure out more solutions. I mean, we're never going to tell somebody like, your deal's not closing for like 3 weeks. We're not interested in looking at this. Like, we're going to always say, hey, send it over, get it over to us. Let's have a quick chat about it. Let's have a review on it quickly. How do you want, are you buying this for yourself? Are you intending to rent it out? Like, what's your intention with it, right? Like, you're buying it as a single family. It's single family. You're buying it single family. But, do you want to convert it like into a duplex or a triplex? Do you even know if you can? Like, have you checked that out? These sorts of things, people take it for granted. They just kind of think, you probably can do it because somebody else did it, right? And it's like, well, they might have done it like illegally. Yeah. Or they could, because they did check it out, and that area of the city is zoned for that. And then your area you're buying it is not, right? So when you're doing real estate investing as opposed to buying single family homes, hopefully this conversation's illustrated that there are more things to think about. There are more things to discuss. There are more things that you should be taking an initiative on and going out there and getting, properly officially educated on, right? Like, don't take somebody's word that, it says in the real estate listing, it's a fourplex. Well, they can put whatever they want in there. Yeah. Right. Or it says, on the tax form that it's a fourplex. Right. I think that you want official documents from the authority, which would be, the city, the zoning and building department. Like, what are they saying their records show? Right. That's the other thing too. Like, every city is different too. Every city and municipality are different. Some are a lot more helpful and quicker, and then some are brutal, right? They give you like next to nothing. They're super slow. And so sometimes you have to know that too, because ultimately you might have to make a business decision based on a bit of like risk reward. Like, okay, maybe this property isn't actually zoned the way we want it to be. For example, a duplex. but it's always been used that way. We've got the documents from the lawyer from all the previous owners saying it's been continuous. We're going to take the risk and we're going to roll with it. And if we get a notice of compliance, well, that's bad luck. We'll have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might say, no, we're not like that. We're not taking that risk. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, really appreciate that, Ryan. We'll throw a link to all of Ryan and Carson Law's contact information in the video description down below, guys. Again, I really do want to encourage you, reach out, preemptively, right? Reach out the moment you're getting into a transaction, and make sure you're being really transparent with your lawyer, with your accountants, with your power team. It's so much easier for them to help you if they actually understand the facts on the ground. Because if you don't give them that little data point, they won't know to have that entire talk to you about title insurance or about building permits or whatever the case may be. So again, really appreciate wealth of knowledge as always, Ryan.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks again to Ryan for taking the time to shoot this video. If you guys got value from it, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to my channel. If you want to reach out to Ryan or someone from his team, I really encourage you to do so. It's important that you have a lawyer that you feel comfortable having an open conversation with. And I hope you realize how conversational Ryan is with us based upon these videos. So all his contact information is in the video description down below. And again, we'll see you guys next week.